Has everybody heard of the Bigfoot War of 1850 something? Well, the story goes basically is how LaFleur County got its name is Captain LaFleur. Captain LaFleur. There was Choctaw settlement. There's a lot of Indian Choctaw settlement in these mountains, and the story basically goes shortly that they were complaining that some of the children were being taken and some of their food was taken stolen by these creatures, these monsters that lived in the mountains south of here. What we've discovered is if it's true, it would be actually McCurtain County. They're given the location, but the problem is when you see the stories on the internet and you read about some of them, there's some variations in them. I worked for the Nation, Choctaw Nation, and I knew a lot of people in the Cultural Preservation Department and some other departments, and I quietly was asking around, and I have another friend that had some connections to the Chickasaw, and through different grapevines you can find things out, and at this point, it's just a story. Even looking back in some written archive, there is absolutely no mention, but the story goes that these creatures were taking some of the women and children and stealing. Well, they got together, which would be similar to what we refer to as the light horsemen, the tribal police, or the light horse. Well, they were to go down into the mountains to find this monstrous creatures. Well, they followed the smell, if I remember right, that's one of the stories I've heard. They followed the smell to this area in a canyon where they came across these beings, creatures. The foul smell of and I won't, there's children here, but someone that's been dead a while. Well, they get in a battle with these creatures. They were Flint.
I read it about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, if you want to finish it, because I've heard it so much, but I've also heard from reliable that it's just a story. But
the story goes that Captain LaFleur was of French and Choctaw descent, and his family, which a lot of the 5 civilized tribes had situations like that, but his family had been a hereditary chief from a few generations back or something of that nature, had married into that hereditary. But anyway, so he had a position as a captain, and they went out looking for these creatures that were stealing crops and stored up stuff, the winter coming on, plus the women and children were missing. And so they trailed sign, and I don't know how many people there were. I would say just 50. It may have been less, may have been more, according to the story. I don't remember. But when they came upon the location, they did smell the decaying bodies and the stench that they associated with the creature. And most of the horses just blew up, started bucking, kicking, fighting. And most of the men were unable to control their horses initially. And then, anyway, Captain LaFleur and a group of brothers, I forget their last name, but they were known as mighty, big, tall, strong men, were able to control their horses and continue the assault. And supposedly Captain LaFleur's horse, he was in the lead. And as they came, the females and children, Bigfoot, fled, and 3 adult males remained to fight. And at that point, his horse was decapitated. He landed on the ground, lost his rifle, began to empty his revolver, and then drew a saber, and he subsequently was also decapitated. And the remaining men, using the guns they had acquired to buffalo hunt in the further west, so they had pretty powerful, modern rifles, as modern as was available at that time. And they began to shoot the creatures in the head, and they subsequently prevailed and killed the 3 remaining Bigfoot male, is the way the story goes.
that's pretty much, I've heard different versions, but that's pretty much exactly what I've heard and what I've read. Again, from a standpoint, you're not going to get an official from the tribe, an official stand on it. But as far as documentation, written documentation, there is none. The way the story explains is how that person know that story, where did he get his information of the details of that, if that actually occurred. But there's no even some of the old timers, we say old timers, some of the old timers I know that know somebody says that's not true. So who knows? But I have to tell you, I'd give you an award because I've never had a phone ring at storytelling before in Honobia. Never had a phone ring in storytelling because hardly anybody has cell service.
Well, that was my oldest daughter calling to see what's up anyway. So, about a year and a half ago, me and wife was sleeping, and she come woke me up and said, our daughter was sick and we need to take her to the hospital. And it was after midnight. And I said, and my son-in-law called and said, you need to come right now. And you know what I mean? I said, yeah, we're on our way back quick as we can. But yes, stay on with her son. And so we got dressed quick, and out the door we went. And as soon as they got out to drive, we live out in the country, southeast of Norman. Okay, you talk about Little River, you know, falling all the way down. It starts over there.
Thunderbird Lake, about 3 miles. I would barely hear back here. Hold the mic up to your mouth.
Okay, so we took off out of the driveway, turned on the road we live on is Etowah. So anyway, quarter mile down the road just about, I seen on the side of the road a figure that was all black with a white face. And it wasn't a hurry anyway, I just seen it and went on. And did you see that person or whatever it was standing by the side of the road? Did you see it?
No, I didn't.
Unless you didn't see it, but I did. I said, why was the person?
Why he's a big skeptic.
Well, it's another story. Anyway, I did see that because the person or something standing on the side of the road just plain as day with lights, my headlights hit it. And so, well, it was just black with white face with a lot of his hair done, I don't know. That was one of them.
Everybody was talking about the little people, and I didn't realize that it was something that other people had seen, but this was about 4 years ago. My grandson's 5 years old, and it was broad daylight. We live out in the country, and behind our house is just total woods for 3 miles, all to the lake. And there's thick, you can't walk through it. But anyway, behind our house, there's an air conditioner thing, module, and we had company, and my grandson was young. Kids were outside playing in the back, and they come, well, the 5-year-old, he come running in with tears streaming down his face and screaming, I saw Bigfoot, I saw Bigfoot. And he was just shaking, his hands were just quivering. And nobody was out there. Everybody that was at our place was in there, the adults. The other little boy, the grandson, the older grandson, he said, well, I was out there, but I didn't see it. But he said he saw something, and he described it as kind of looked, it was black, it had white on its front, and it was sitting playing in the leaves, and then he said it dropped the leaves and it took off running. But I had to calm him down to get him to tell us what it was. First, when he said that, of course we went out there, look, we didn't see nothing. But we had to calm him down, and he wasn't faking, he didn't know how to fake it. He's 5, tears streaming down his face, and he's red, and his body is shaking. But he just called it Bigfoot. So that's the story there.
Thank y'all. Do you have something? Come on. Yeah.
My name's Gary Segrist, and I told a story last night. I'm from Hot Springs, Arkansas, retired football coach, and I had an encounter in 2007, and it ended up, I'm not going to retell that story that I told last night, but it ended up as an episode on Finding Bigfoot, and they came to my cabin down at Lake Millwood, which is in Sevier County in southwest Arkansas, and did that program. But since then, I started compiling stories, and I wrote a little book, and I really enjoyed finding all the people just start coming to me like they do here, telling stories, just story after story after story. But the only ones I put in that book was the ones that I really either knew the people personally, or knew something about them, or interviewed them, and really investigated it. And so I'm not going to tell the same story I told last night, but I'm going to tell two that I think they're really, really valid and give a lot of credentials to the existence of Bigfoot. The first one, around Lake Millwood near Ashdown, Arkansas. Lake Millwood's big lake, it's 298,000, and it's a swamp. It's nothing, full of alligators, and it's just a big swamp. And I've got a little cabin down there. But I had a person come to me, and he's an Arkansas game and fish biologist. He works for the Game and Fish division there in Arkansas. He said, I'm going to tell you a story. He said, you can't use my name. And he said, he said, I want to tell you this story because I know you're interested in this. And I said, okay. And I knew this gentleman faintly, not real close, but I knew him, but I knew of him. And he'd been working for the Game and Fish as a biologist for like 25 years. He said, I was in a clear cut just north of Lake Millwood, and he said, I was taking a survey. And I don't remember what kind of survey, some kind of animal he was surveying. And he said, I saw something, I was on top of a knoll, on top of a hill, and I saw something at the bottom of the hill. He said it was about 150 yards away, and he said it was darkish red, or even, he said it was even so dark it almost looked black, but he said when the sun hit it, it looked almost red. And he said he thought it was a bear. And he said, well, golly, we don't see bear very often here, so he was going to look at it, so he got his binoculars out. Now, once again, he was just 150 yards away, and he was looking down. He was on top of it. Well, whatever it was eating berries. And he said, all of a sudden it stood up and just turned around and looked right at him like he knew he was there. And he said, it was a Bigfoot. He said it was huge. And he said, he knew the black bear do walk sometime on the upright and be bipedal. But he said this was no black bear. And he said he watched it for at least 5 minutes through binoculars. And finally, he got to me. He was in his truck, and he started to drive down to where he could get a better look at it. And we drove down, and said it just disappeared. He said it was just gone. And he told me, he said, if you ask us our official stance on whether there's that type of creature that lives in our woods, he said our official stance for the Game and Fish Commission in Arkansas is there's no such creature, no such animal in our woods. He said, but I've worked in these woods for 25 years, and I know every animal that's in these woods. And he said, there's no doubt 100% that it was a Bigfoot. And he said, where it went, I don't know, because he said, by the time I got to my truck and got to the bottom of that hill, he said, it didn't take a minute, 2 minutes. And he said, that was a clear cut, and he was gone. But he said it was upright. He said it was absolutely huge. And I asked him, I said, well, how tall do you think it was? He said, it was hard to judge. He said, but it was a lot bigger than a human, and it was a lot broader and a lot wider. And he ought to know the animals that's in those woods. And so he did that. The most recent story about Bigfoot that I've been acquainted with happened in Plain Dealing, Louisiana. 5 miles north of Plain Dealing. It's right there on the Arkansas-Louisiana line by Fouke, where the Fouke Monster is. It was real close in that area, right there. It all comes together. And a relative of mine, son, who is a fireman in Shreveport, it was on Thanksgiving Day 2016. And they were home, and he brought he was a fireman, and he brought one of his fireman friends home to Thanksgiving dinner. And they were going to sit on a deer stand after dinner that evening and try to kill a deer. Well, he said it was mist and rain, and just a real light rain. He said, but just enough to get you wet. So they ate Thanksgiving meal with the family. They got in their truck, and they started going to their deer stand. Well, he was about 4 miles from his home, and there's a big railroad track there, and it's built up on a dike. That land's real flat right there. It's built up. And he said they started slowing down to go over that dike, and his friend grabbed him by the arm and said, "Stop, stop, stop, stop." And he stopped his truck. He said, "Look," he said, standing right by a big pine tree. And I noticed last night you were talking about the limbs on the pine tree and how they're, you know, how they're pretty high. And he said, standing right by the pine tree was this just huge creature. And it just stood there and looked at him. They stopped, and it was stopped. They looked at it. And he kind of pulled up, and he was going to go up and turn around and come back. And when he did, it was gone. But both of them saw it. His friend saw it first, and he saw him. And they marked it on the tree where where it was standing. And they went and measured it, and it was over 10 foot where they thought the head of that creature was. I went and checked it out, and it was grassy, so there's no tracks or anything like that. But I went and looked at it. He told me it was below the first limb, and I measured it too, and it was just really, really tall. And I said, "Well, are you sure it was a Bigfoot?" He said, "I'll tell you what, it was either a 10-foot man in a ghillie suit, or it was a Bigfoot." He said, "There's no doubt in my mind." And that's the most current sighting, something that I know of somebody that had it. Thank you.
Do you think somewhere that Bigfoot's having a story telling about us? Where they're all sitting around their little campfire explaining the stories of all the hunters that they snuck up on, and all the ones they scared, and all their stories.